chair out of the way. Right. I'll probably have to slide back, otherwise my hands would disappear at some point, but we'll start with this. So, just feet down, a little bit forwards in your chair if you can do so comfortably. Rub your hands together. And then tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. And your arm. Side. Belly. And finally your legs. And then sitting back, looking for this, just settle in, your weight dropping into the chair, and that feeling in, particularly, I suppose, your ribs, your chest, your shoulders, but lower down as well, all the way through your body as much as possible. A kind of draining away, dissolving is sometimes referred to, of tightness and stiffness in your body. Just notice any changes, breathing. Sometimes you get a sense of your heart beating and things like that as your thoughts quieten. And you feel just the sort of pulse of your circulation in your fingers. There's all sorts of things that you might feel. It's a bit random, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing it wrong if you don't feel anything like that. It's just, you know, how your body is responding at this moment. Now bring the feet in, sit forwards. That dissolving, releasing feeling is something ideally is there always in the background. And something that we can kind of come back to, remind ourselves, so another sort of reference point, another focus point. And starting to turn your head. So one thing we almost immediately notice, I think, is that as soon as we start to move, things like that releasing of tightness in the body, that dissolving feeling, can easily get lost. And we develop habits of movement in our lifetime, habits of posture, habits of movement, and it's very easy to slip back into those. Very hard to break old habits. And sometimes those old ways of moving will increase the tightness and the stiffness. It's like we sort of habitually struggle for the movement, however simple it might be. So when you notice that that's happening, if you notice that's happening, just remind yourself this is a different way of moving, a different approach to movement. And then your shoulders. So what we want to try and do is to replace the old habits with newer, more kind of productive, healthier habits, and then going forwards. And that's just a slow, ongoing process, I think. Hands out to your sides, round. And then raising your arms a little bit, try and make the full circle. Let your elbows hang down slightly, and just feel that the muscles of your arms have a little bit of space around them. There's like they attach at either end to the bones in one way or another, but in between, not sort of stiff and hard and not constricted in their movement. And back the other way. You find that when you can get that feeling in the muscles of your arms, it's quite strong, because it's not how we generally hold our arms. They're going forwards and backwards, and if you can get a sense for what I was talking about there, that sense of space around the muscles and indeed around the bones, you don't want to feel that the muscles are kind of tight against the bones. See if you can get the same sort of feeling as you move in the muscles of the upper body, especially in the back and around the spine. So you can begin to feel almost as though sort of the muscles are being very gently massaged by the movements. And when you turn, that's going to change slightly. Some muscles will now be extending, but still maintaining that space. And of course, one of the big influences on that is going to be how far we turn, and another is how we turn. We have to make sure that we're turning from the middle part of our body. And then in the other direction. And going around. So that sort of spaciousness within the body allows for the free movement. And this is partly where we get this idea of a flow of energy from, that flow being harmonious, being balanced, unrestricted, which is in Chinese medicine always seen as being one of the key foundations for good health. And then back the other way. And then come back to the center, step forwards, heel, toes, and gentle pushing into the ground. And again, as much as possible, this sense of space for the movement to take place. That's quite tricky. If you've got, say, a sore knee, then it's even trickier. But interestingly, even if you've had a bad knee in the past and it's okay now, sometimes the kind of memory of that can restrict our movements. That's quite a hard thing to overcome, I think. Okay, and then on the other side. Okay, and then many years ago, I with one particular class, I went into great detail about postures in the standing class. At the end of the class, this woman came up to me and said, "It's all very well," she said, "but I said, I've had 3 kids." And as she said that, she sort of stuck her hip out and held her hand like that, as though she had a child resting on her hip. And it was, it's a perfectly valid point. The things that we've done in our lives, the work that we've done, our life experiences, as I say, any kind of illnesses that we've had, any injuries that we've had, all conditioned how we stand, how we sit, how we move, and often we don't realize that. So just be aware that that may be happening. Don't get sort of annoyed with yourself for it, because we all do it. We all have that. And as I say, kind of when you notice it, just remind yourself that there are possibilities of doing this differently. So now, hands out beside you and circling forwards and backwards. Trying to keep that quiet quality in your arms and your hands. All you're doing independently, shall we say, with your arms at this point is rotating them. You're not trying to move them forwards or backwards. It's the movement of your weight, the tilting of your body that is doing that for you. And with that quieter movement in our arms, we can begin to recognize more of what's happening in chest, upper back, ribs, so on and so forth. Now, change into fisherman castanet. Not a great deal more happening in our arms with this one, except that as we stop, the momentum of the movement will swing them forwards a little bit. The momentum, and again, those little movements in chest and upper back will complement that. You may well find there's a sort of urge to reach out a little bit more. Try and resist that. So very soft in your shoulders and your back. And this lovely wave-like movement through our body. So these two movements that we've just done really set the scene, as it were. They actually show us that there can be quite a dynamic quality in our arms and our hands without just having to do that much. And as we build the exercises, they become a bit more complex. We need to do a bit more with our hands, but that quieter quality should underpin and be the foundation for everything that we do. So for instance, when we come to rolling the ball, here we maintain the angle of the arms, we don't lift the arms, we just come back. And as we come to the upright position, we let our elbows drop. As opposed to what we often habitually want to do at this point, which is to strain to raise our arms. Now going into pigeon spreads its wings, the arms are going to go out more. But what makes the arms go out more is that opening in the chest, the closing in the back, not an extra effort on the part of my arm. If you actually look at the shape of my arm, that curving downwards, it's actually not that different to the rolling the ball in. I'm not dropping my elbows down in the way that I do when I roll the ball in. When I roll the ball in, I do that. And I've turned my hands palm in. So I'm doing one thing less, as in I'm not dropping my elbows down. And I'm replacing that with a rotation inwards. Everything else, as far as the arms are concerned, are the same. A bit more dynamic in the chest. So the changes from one movement to another are really quite interesting. And then just let your elbows drop down a little bit more and your arms will naturally rotate. And we go into pushing away. For all those movements, and think about the last three movements: pigeon spreads its wings, rolling the ball, pushing a wave. In the feet and the hips, pelvis, the movement is the same. That rocking forwards and backwards. A little bit of variation really in chest and upper back, but mostly in terms of how much there's an expansion and a contraction. And just a very slight, careful adjustment with the arms. So now, go back, and we're going to do those last three movements in a sequence. A slightly different sequence from what we normally do. So here, I feel that expansion in the front of the body, and I just allow my elbows to drop down. And this time, rather than allowing my elbows to drop down, I don't do that, but I turn my hands palm in, so the chest open and close. And then put my elbows down, push forwards. Again, roll the ball in. Now, just rotate the arms in. Your elbows come down in front of your hips and then out slightly through the chest opening and pushing in. Now imagine the ball underneath your arms here and swing forwards through the angle between your arms and your body. Keep that angle there as you come upright. Turn your hands palm in. Open the chest. Pigeon spreads its wings. Pushing away. Now we change to pigeon spreads its wings simply really by rotating the arms in. The main change. Now we just drop the elbows down to initiate the change into pushing a wave. Here, let the fingers creep out a little bit. Imagine the ball. The hands drop all the way down. One more round. Now, punch with both fists. Turning your hands out, winding around. So with this first few exercises, the principal driving movement is that movement of your weight forwards and backwards, alternating between forwards and backwards, between hips, buttocks, and legs and feet. When we change to the vertical exercises, one key change is going to be that alternation between feet and hips. We'll change to something that's pretty much simultaneous, a gentle press down through your feet and your hips. So come into this position here, feel that press down and feel the movement upwards, like two waves meeting and rising up. And just an expansion and contraction up and down through your spine, like a ripple going up and down your back. Sense of, because of the push down, an expansion here, like a ball expanding and contracting. That building into the whole of your upper body. Not straining for that, not straining against your body. Change to the wild goose. And then parting the clouds. Oh, sorry, no, that's the wrong one. I was going to say mark it out. Don't do that. We're going to change the dragon plucks the stars from the sky. And then let your hands drop down. And now that same expansion and contraction up through one side. Always trying to bring the focus of your attention inwards, not to exclude what's outside, but to really highlight these internal movements. Because they're the ones that will combine into the bigger, more expansive movements. Because it's actually very good for our minds to really focus gently and deeply into our body. It's a process that generates a great sense of calmness. It doesn't always feel that way, especially if it's a difficult exercise. You don't feel that calm. But the ones that you're familiar with are the ones to really look for that in. One more on each side. And both hands in, and now it's pushing in two directions. First direction is upward, feeling your spine lengthen, contract very gently. Again, like somebody will massage in your back, starting in the same way, but this sort of spreading out, this broadening of the movement. Next time, adding the turning in. Turn from your hips very gently so that you don't interfere with that expansion and contraction. And twist your back up and twist your shoulders around. Now this time changing and scooping the sea, looking at the sky. And then grasping the tiger's ears. Good. Switch sides. And change. One more time. Now back to this movement of your weight. So we did this quite a lot in those last few exercises. I said the main kind of generative drive for many of the exercises, and in fact for all of them really, because it's the movement from one foot from the foot to the hip and so on and so forth that creates the dynamic. And sometimes it alternates, as it is at the moment, and sometimes they both move, sort of push down together, and they come together in the middle, and they rise up together like two waves meeting in the beach. Either way, that sort of downward push, if you like, think of it like that, through feet and hips is important. Now we're going to add in the turn again. So we turn, come back, turn the other way. And as you turn in your hip, but that brings your shoulder around. Now hold your hands in front of you. And to begin with, just imagine carrying a tray of drinks or a cup of tea in both hands. And just feel how that movement moves your arms for you. So you're clearly doing something. There's a sense of what we would call intent in our arms and our hands. But it's the kind of function that actually means that we don't want to move the arms too much, the hands too much. We get a very distinctive feeling, quality of movement. And what we want to try and do is to move without losing that feeling. We've already done sort of 3/4 of whatever movements we're going to create out of this. So this time, as you turn, just push your hand out a little bit, and it go up, turn it palm down and come back to the middle, turn the other way, the weight move a little bit, hitting the ball in front of the shoulder. Come back. So as I turn in this direction, my weight goes more into that foot. I come back, my weight more in the middle here. Go forwards, more of my weight in that foot that I'm turning towards. When you turn and move forwards, see if you can just make that distinction between the foot where your weight is, where you've got most of your weight, and the foot on the opposite side, which doesn't have anything like as much weight going into it. It's a very subtle distinction there. Now this time, we're going to change the movement again. You go forward slightly, feel more of your weight on this side of the body, and then just come across to the other side, drawing your hand across, turn your body, just let your arm rotate, and going down, so painting the circle in front of you, go across. So not so much forwards and backwards movement now. Again, we have the majority of our weight back in our hips here. This one. Don't concern yourself overly with this rotating movement. Once you relax into the movement, it'll be quite sort of natural for your arm to rotate at a certain point. But you might want to use this image of painting a circle in front of you. If you had a paintbrush in your hand, how would your hand move with the paintbrush? Now change sides. It's quite hard to sustain this very simple movement. A circle is a hard shape to draw anyway. And just try drawing a circle freehand. Very, very difficult. And to sustain the focus of attention we need is quite a big task. We don't often maintain a gentle focus of attention on something for that long. Our minds naturally and quite rightly sort of move out and they scan the environment around us. And we're not trying to stop that, but we want to retain this as the central awareness. It's a lot harder than the exercise when you look at it from the outside suggests. So now, when this hand has come up to your shoulder height, bring your other hand into the movement. Turn your hands in to hold the ball. Move across to your opposite side. And as you turn your body, use the turn to help your arms rotate the ball. So now your opposite hand on top. This is wave hands like clouds. And across. Rotate the ball. So now if you're mirroring my movement, you'll have your left arm on top. You're going to move across to your left. And then as you turn, more of your weight in the left side of your body. And then you move across. So these exercises where we learn to distinguish the pattern of the movement of the weight, where the weight is predominantly, are very important for movements like this one, wave hands like clouds. Of all the movements, really. And this time, holding your hands over your chest, the archer. Weight still sinking down through your hips, legs and feet. One more time. And rubbing your hands together again. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Onto one shoulder. Your arm. On the other side. Upper part of your chest. Belly. And your legs. Good. And then stand. I just realised I forgot to mute people. It's gone okay, but I shouldn't do that now. So, training our attention, training our minds is as much a part of Tai Chi training as anything physical. To be honest, I don't think it's reasonable to make the distinction between mind and body quite that much. But the process of training the mind is referred to in Tai Chi and in neuroscience, interestingly, as hardwiring, and it's about sort of repeating actions, and we do it all the time. You know, if you're I don't know, if you do something like knitting and you learn a new stitch or something like that, a new method to start off with, you'll be kind of fumbling, but then you have to do it slowly and you keep doing it over. But after a while, you'll begin to get a bit smoother and faster at it. And some of that is the training of what we think of as mind, and in a way the intermediary between mind and body, which is the brain and nervous system. And this is something that happens to everybody all through our lives. It's part of how we learn new things all the time. So things like, for instance, paying attention to the body involves a degree of hardwiring. Recognizing full and empty movement of the weight involves a degree of hardwiring. Now, sinking down and pushing up. So again, we can feel that extension and contraction through the body, through our back. In fact, it's probably more obvious in the standing exercises. And I think in many ways, from the point of view of that training of the mind and the nervous system, the hardwiring process, I think in many ways, the seated exercises are much harder and in some ways a lot more effective because it's subtler. So you have to really focus quite strongly, concentrate quite hard to notice these things in the chair. And then change into wild goose. And then again, part in the clouds. One more time. One foot forwards. Transferring your weight forwards and backwards. Always looking for this to be a nice, smooth movement. And we want the upper body to be engaged. If you imagine moving in water, that will start to happen for you. But again, we don't want our arms to lead the movement, our shoulders to lead the movement. So one of the habits that we want to get out of is of taking our lead from the upper body, shall we say. These things, the hands in particular, can dominate really easily. And the habit that we replace with is to move from the feet upwards. Push gently down to feel that change from what we refer to sometimes as full and empty in the legs. And the weight moves into the leg, it fills up. A more direct translation of the Chinese terms would be substantial and insubstantial, by the way, which is a bit of a mouthful, but quite interesting to play with. So now we're going to add to this idea of carrying the tray of drinks. An alternative image, if carrying the drinks doesn't appeal to you, is pushing the supermarket trolley, because they're really difficult to control, aren't they? And we kind of know instinctively, if we move our arms around too much, the damn things go all over the place. So we have to hold them quite still in a way, and actually move the body to get the things to move without crashing. So both of these are images that begin to change how we're moving. And then see if you can maintain this as you raise your toes and your heel. The thing about both of those images is that your arms are quite active and yet at the same time quite still. You might even want to just allow yourself to slowly extend it as though you're putting the tray on a table or lifting it off the table, but still very carefully, not right back there, incidentally, get your hands in front and see if you can maintain that still quality within the movement as you step. This is quite tricky, you may have noticed, and there'll always be those little wobbles. So, yeah, again, a very simple exercise, but quite a difficult one to maintain. And it's to help us get out of the habit of that leading with the arms. Check out. Is that if you're doing something like that and you find that one arm's really hurting or your arms are aching, just swap over rather than the tray. Imagine just carrying a cup of tea or something, or whatever takes your fancy, a glass of beer, wine, whatever, I don't mind. We'll start off with just this movement. Get the movement in your legs. Imagine being in water, so you start to feel, after a while, these changes in the upper body. Bring your hands into the movement. Holding the tray, drinks, pushing a supermarket trolley, whatever image works best for you. And then raising your toes and your heel. So remember the phrase, when one part of your body is in motion, your whole body is in motion. So trying to just shift our attention away from a particular part of the body, but rather have a sense of the whole body in movement. And then stepping in. Take your time, remember, put the foot down, press in gently, feel that contact with the ground. And then taking a few steps, either forwards or backwards, depending on where you've got space. Change direction if you haven't done so already. Feeling through with your foot. whether you're going forwards or backwards. And then bring your feet parallel. Let's have 1 foot forwards and go into fisherman cast a net and see if you can retain some of that feeling that you had with the last exercise, particularly in your arms and your hands. Again, one of the old writings tells us to seek the stillness within the movement. And I think this is something that is very special in Tai Chi. I wouldn't say it's unique to Tai Chi, but something very obvious in Tai Chi, which is that although it's a very dynamic art, there's also this lovely sense of quietness and stillness about it. And then change over. Good. Go back to your chairs. So, this is in comfortably as possible. Remember, try and let your feet take some of the weight. And again, can you feel that subtle distinction? Ideally, if we can do this without straining the back, about 2/3 of your weight in your hips and buttocks. So about 1/3 in your feet. Your hands drop down and embrace tiger and return to mountain. It's very hard to maintain those qualities of stillness and so on and so forth all the way through. What we can do is recognize, and this is a good exercise for helping us with this, recognize that there's a rhythm in Tai Chi. The movements extend and contract, and extend and contract. And so there's a movement outwards, but a movement back to that sort of point of stillness. And we just get used to that and used to gently touching base on a regular basis. One more time. And rest. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. So hope that was useful. Yes. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you.
Take care.
Have a good weekend. And hopefully see you next week sometime.
Yes.
Take care, everybody. Look after yourselves. Bye-bye.